Last night, the Russians hit my family's house. Firefighters spent half of the night putting out flames that spread to the upper floors. It was really hard to extinguish it because it was on the upper levels and hard to reach. Well, I couldn't sleep the other half of the night because our forces were shooting down drones right outside my windows. North Korea troops continue to arrive in the Kursk region of Russia, and it seems that Lukashenko smells trouble and has decided to distance himself from Putin. I'm Drutska, and today I will tell you about it all. Thousands of soldiers from an elite unit of the Korean Republic's army began arriving on Wednesday and are expected to try to help push Ukrainian forces out of Russia, according to the New York Times. Informed source in Ukraine reported that by Monday, October 28th, around 5,000 North Korean troops will be gathered in the Kursk region. These troops are part of an elite unit of the Korean People's Army. They are being flown from Vladivostok by large transport planes and arrive in western Russia to take further to combat on. Currently, the North Korean troops are only focused in the Kursk region. It is noted that North Korean soldiers have not yet entered combat, but it's unclear what the role will play on the front lines. But the New York Times adds that uncertain how North Korean military personnel will change the dynamics on the battlefield. Well, the North Korean military has not participated in any war since the 1950s, raising questions about the capabilities of even their elite units. Of course, there is another theory about this with North Korean soldiers, as we have also seen videos and photos from the marching in the Red Square in Moscow, walking, taking pictures with people. This whole story with the military presence from North Korea also could be saber-rattling against US as a test of the US reactions. Because what have we seen? At first, Americans and even the head of NATO stated that they did not notice presence of North Korean troops in Russia. Then Lloyd Austin seemed to say that they had actually seen them and even said if the North Korean military intends to participate in the war of Russia against Ukraine, that's a very, very serious issue. Like, very serious. You know what I mean? So it seems that they are already there, but they say they don't understand why they are there. Then, White House Communications Advisor for National Security John Kirby stated that the United States considers a possible deployment of some North Korean military units in the Kursk region. However, the US does not yet have information about their intentions. Here's what he said. However, we do believe that this is certainly possible, and I would even say that it's likely that at least some of these North Korean troops may be deployed in the Kursk region. But in what capacity and for what purpose, that still remains unclear. So really, why did the North Korean troops come to Russia? And they might soon be not only in Kursk, but also somewhere in Donbass, in eastern Ukraine. I've heard there are quite interesting modern art museums and beautiful Italian restaurants there in the area. Well, let me tell you why they came. Putin is afraid to go for general mobilization because of the potential negative consequences. So he is plunging holes even through North Korea. Russia used only one approach in its wars, throwing in huge number of personnel and ignoring massive losses. It's clear that with Russian losses exceeding 600,000 personnel, Putin simply needs more people. Russia is using North Korean troops as cannon fodder for the war in Ukraine. What's also interesting is that according to available information, each North Korean soldier will be paid $2,000 a month, more than average North Korean earns in a year. Just imagine that much money. Additionally, North Korean military personnel may take on rear support tasks, which will allow Russian soldiers previously involved in logistics, for example, to be sent to the front lines, or the troops in the border regions with Ukraine might be used to build fortifications, which would lighten the road of Russian infantry. So the reason is that North Korean leader Kim benefits from having his soldiers fight in Russia's war is clear. First of all, because he can get not only money from Putin, but also technology transfers for launching nuclear missiles from submarines and small nuclear warheads. The more Russia relies on the military forces of North Korea, the greater the likelihood of advanced Russian military technologies being passed on to North Korea. Well, before I continue, I want to thank all of you who sent copies on Buy Me a Coffee and become patrons. Please do so. If you want more videos on the channel, you can also help this channel by subscribing to it and like this video, as it will definitely help Ukrainian content to be seen by more people. I suggest you also subscribe to my X page, where I post regular updates about the situation in Ukraine, and to my Instagram, where I show the daily life in Ukraine. Furthermore, according to Andrei Kovalenko, head of the Center for Combating Disinformation of the National Security and Defense Council, the main goal of North Korea in sending troops to Russia is to allow them to gain field experience in real combat conditions for future confrontation with South Korea. Their participation in battles there will be the first step in this training. After all, as I mentioned, there is a lack of actual battlefield experience even among trained special forces and Rambo types who break through concrete walls. So, as we can see, there are only positives, just not for us, Ukrainians. Because while it may not significantly affect battlefield like in a movie about Spartans or any final scene from films like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, or Game of Thrones, where a small group comes in and wipes everyone out in the last 7 minutes of the film. The Koreans won't do that, but let's agree that 12,000 is not a small number, and it will definitely pose a problem for Ukrainian defense forces. But I haven't finished yet. What about NATO? Bloomberg reports that the response from the alliance country to the deployment of North Korean soldiers in Russia for participation in the war against Ukraine are limited, but they may include at least 2 options: increasing support for Ukraine and developing partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region. Let's think about what's wrong with that. Increasing support for Ukraine? How exactly? If you keep saying that what we really need right now is something that could genuinely really affect the situation, like permission to strike military targets in Russia, for example, including places where troops are stationed, like in Kursk, how will you assistance significantly, and I repeat significantly, this assistance would change the battlefield situation? Provide more weapons. Well, the Americans, don't consider me ungrateful, but you still haven't delivered what you promised before, and it's very difficult for us Ukrainian forces during Russia offensive operation to be without those weapons. To be fair, it's not just Americans. The Europeans haven't delivered either. But we are not here to blame anyone. We are here to discuss. So now about developing partnership in the Indo-Pacific region. It's wonderful, of course, but I don't know how that will affect the presence or likely the absence of North Korean troops in Russia in the short term. Let me know what you guys think about these two NATO points and what you believe they might mean. Now, let me tell you another piece of news about how Lukashenko is backing away because he sensed trouble with Putin. We keep talking about North Korea, and rightly so, because it's really important topic, but I feel the West is expecting another scrub if they don't get their act and shit together, find some balls and do some significant measures. Well, let's talk about Father Luka. First of all, Luka has started to distance himself and deny that he gave permission for the use of his territory on February 2022 when Russia sent its troops into Ukraine. Lukashenko stated that Putin invaded Ukraine from Belarus without his permission. It turned out that in February 22, Putin didn't inform his Belarusian colleague Alexander Lukashenko that he was planning to attack Ukraine from Belarus. Luka said that this in the interview with the BBC, but the story goes like this. There were exercises involving several thousand Russian soldiers. Putin began withdrawing these troops from where they were in southern part of Belarus down the road along the border with Ukraine. At some point, he redirected some of these troops to Kyiv. I'm sure they were provoked, said Luka. Well, according to him, how the Russian troops would exit from Belarus depended only on Putin. He could do it through Kyiv or through Minsk, Lukashenko noted. Dude, it's like normal, huh? I mean, let's imagine US troops are going to the Philippines for the exercise and then returning back to US, accidentally landing their jets and landing force in Beijing and capturing Xi's house. Well, I'm exaggerating, of course, but you get what he said, right? Putin was pulling troops through Belarus when he could have actually pulled them back through Warsaw or Berlin. What's a big deal, right? Here. Well, a journalist asked if the Belarusian president called Putin at that moment to clarify what was going on. No, he did not call me, he said, and I didn't call him. Those are his troops and he was the right to move them wherever he wants, Lukashenko said. At the same time, after the war started, Russia deployed tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. However, Lukashenko assured that without his permission, Putin wouldn't be able to use those weapons in the war against Ukraine. He himself is ready to use them only if a foreign soldier would step on Belarusian territory. We don't plan to attack anyone, Luka assured. Well, by the way, I want to remind you that in March 2022, during a meeting with Putin in the Kremlin, Lukashenko claimed that Kyiv was preparing to attack Russian and Belarusian troops. If a preemptive strike hadn't been made 6 hours before the operation, well, means the Russian invasion, they would have attacked our troops in Belarus and Russia, who were conducting exercises. So we didn't start this war. Our conscience is clear, emphasized Luka. Well, in short, Luka has, as usual, 7 versions and each of them is correct. But what we can clearly see is that he is managing to dodge Putin for now so that he doesn't drag Belarusians into fight against us Ukrainians. But that's not all. Russian dictator Alexander Lukashenko stated that there are people in the higher echelons of Russia who want to annex Belarus. However, such an attempt would lead to war, Luka said in an interview with Russian propagandists. He said, "You are smaller, we are bigger, and our economy is like this or that. We will help you, and then you can join Russia." This is not a question that can be asked. It's impossible and realistic, he said. I'm afraid to even say that it's war. According to him, a union state is already being created between Belarus and Russia, allowing for closer relations than even in a unitary state. He said, "We can build such relationship that will be closer and stronger than in a unitary state, and no one will be offended," Lukashenko emphasized. The dictator also noted that today's realities dictate that politicians should think about future consequences, not act on the principles of the past. "This isn't the Middle Age," he said, "where you seize territory, pay taxes, and that's it. The world has changed. It's a different world, so we shouldn't set foolish tasks for ourselves, and we must always think before what will happen next." I'm curious if Grandpa thinks this only applies to him, and that what Russia and Putin did to Ukraine, he obviously didn't mention. Well, let me reveal the secret of why Luka suddenly became so bold. His elections are coming up soon. Well, actually, it's the presidential elections in Belarus, but we know who will win, especially since Luka even stated that he plans to run, imagine. To avoid any attempt to a coup, he decided to play along with his people a bit and say, no, no, no. Nuclear weapons won't be used without our consent. No, no, no. There won't be any annexation of us. Belarus is the whole independent, strong state. Well, let me remind you, if you didn't know, that in 2023 media reported on the document titled Strategic Goals of the Russian Federation and Belarus, which outlines a phased annexation of Belarus to Russia by 2030. The plan, drafted in 2021, including efforts to ensure predominant influence of Russia over Belarus' social policy, trade, economy, science, education, and culture. Among the methods to achieve this goal were using Russian passports to Belarusian citizens, creating a group of Belarusians interested in integration, and directing business circles towards the Russian market. Additionally, there were plans to align Belarusian legislation with Russian laws. The document also noted possible threats from Lukashenko's reapproachment with NATO and the influence of nationalists and pro-Western politicians on Minsk. So that's the situation, guys. Let me know what you think about how Luka still managed to hide from Putin and even make such claims to the world. Well, now on to the sad news. Late yesterday evening, a Russian drone struck my family's house in Kyiv. The terrorist state of Russia attacked Kyiv using kamikaze drones. Unfortunately, the UAV hit a multi-story residential building, damaging apartments on the 17th, 18th, and 19th floors. My relatives weren't hurt because the apartment is on the lower floors, but more than 100 people were evacuated from the building, and it was a Friday evening and everyone was resting, relaxing after work, having dinners. Many were already asleep. Firefighters who quickly arrived on the scene tried to extinguish the fire, but it was quite difficult. Unfortunately, a 14-year-old girl became a victim of the Russian occupiers, and 6 others were injured. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, arrived also and said that if the fire hadn't damaged the building load-bearing structures, they would begin to restore the apartments affected by the fire as quickly as possible. And I really hope that's the case. Also, as a result of the Russian strike on a residential building in Dnipro yesterday evening as well, 4 people were killed by the Russians, including the wife and little daughter of a police officer. The number of injured has risen to 21 people, including 4 children. Well, later, around 6 in the morning, but it was completely still dark, the Russians launched drones again, and they were shooting down just right outside my window. Again, there were explosions, the sky was burning, and I once again have to complain about my headache and dark circles under my eyes. And if you say that you don't see anything, thank you for your support, but they are right there. Well, guys, my American listeners, was the situation like there? Tell me. I read and see polls showing that the chances of both candidates are very close now. So what's your prediction and what should we expect in the elections? That's it for today, and I want to thank all of you for supporting Ukraine, watching Ukrainian content. Please like this video, and if you really liked it and you want more videos, you can support the channel's development on Patreon or buy me a coffee. See you soon, and Slava Ukraini!